Okay, Public Protection and Judiciary Committee will come to order. First item of business is roll call. Janet?
Bob Fiedler. Paul Adams. Here. Mark Carsland. Kathy Leaf.
Present.
Tim Ramberg.
Present.
Our next item of business is our approval of minutes, and we do have an amendment. I'll call on Supervisor Ramberg.
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment under the request for future agenda items. Just like to condense it to what I was speaking to one sentence and leave what Chair Fiedler was talking about alone. So if we could combine the first sentence and the last sentence, in the first two sentences and the last sentence, into Supervisor Ramberg requests an update on the March or April agenda regarding the status of counties encouraging the state in funding defense attorneys, and then leave Bob's portion alone.
No objection to the amendment. It's accepted, and so now we'll move an approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Ramberg.
He beat me to it.
Motion. Supervisor Adams, second. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved. Public comment. Is there anybody here for public comment? Anybody for public comment? Hearing none, we'll go to business items and our financial review. And Ken is not with us today. He's at a conference. So the financial director is now with us, Dustin Hawkins. So Dustin, thank you for joining us today. Your first appearance in this role, as I understand it.
Yep, thank you.
So welcome. And do you have a report you'd like to share with us?
It was in the packet.
Yes.
It's January report, so there's not a lot of year-to-date data, obviously. So the really focus is on the 2022 column. Most all of our entries are in. We still have some grants that are outstanding, so that's why you might see a few departments not in the black still, but otherwise it's looking pretty good for 2022. If anybody has any specific questions, I can try and answer those.
Are there any questions for Dustin? I see none. So you got off easy today, Dustin.
All right,
Ken never
you.
gets away this easy. Thank you for being with us today.
I'll come back in November.
Yeah, come back in November. Exactly. Next item on the agenda is our report from Chief Judge Needham on the circuit courts and the court system.
Thank you. Just really more informational items. We are welcoming a new district court administrator, Chris Channing, who I think most of you had met at some point. Offices just adjacent to this room, left his employment with the state and is, I believe, now working in the court system in Minnesota. But that created a vacancy, and in really record turnaround, a fellow by the name of Ross Munns has joined us, started work this Monday. He comes from North Dakota court system, but has a lot of experience in court administration. And we welcome him, and I trust at some point he'll make an appearance here. So that's one item. Building construction, again, anytime there's work next to the building, we think we're in earthquakes, but we've become relatively tolerant. The big concern generally is just the sound factor. We are a system that sound is critical, especially for making the record in our court reporters, but we've weathered so far, and hopefully I guess, issues we can work out with Ken, and the contractor's been really excellent to work with. If Ken were here, I was going to thank him. I just completed a 9-day jury trial last week. And going into the trial, we were concerned about getting it done in 2 weeks, and then we had the impending snowstorm. And so I made a decision to keep the building open last Monday, which was a county holiday and generally would have been closed, and all staff would have had the day off. But in talking to the attorneys, we concluded that with the snowstorm, with the timing of the trial, that we would go on Monday, and we did. So it involved keeping the building open, and so I thank building services, the facilities folks, court security, Christy Sievers and her staff, my staff, because we got in a full day on Monday and were able to get the trial done by Thursday, albeit in the snowstorm. And so, again, I fully appreciate the cost that goes along with that, but I also appreciate the understanding that, given the nature of the trial, we had to get it in. I think you were aware that treatment court had put a pause on new participants. I'm happy to report that the pause has been lifted and that they are now accepting new applicants. And that is primarily the work of Phil Golly and Kate Brewer and Judge Nordstrand and his team to now coordinate with Programs for Change in providing our AODA treatment services. They've been excellent to work with, and so the pause is off, applicants are being accepted, and treatment court is back up and running in full force. I heard the mention about the amendment to the minutes. My understanding is that the governor's budget does include significant increases for our assistant district attorneys as well as public defender staff. And I don't know what the sense of joint finance is going to be, but there are significant increases built into the budget, which hopefully will help with attraction and, more importantly, retention. What we find is we have ADAs and assistant state public defenders who will put in a couple of years here and then jump the river and go to work. There was a young man I know who we had as an ADA here who went to work in Ramsey County and did primarily, is doing nothing but misdemeanors in traffic, and his starting wage was $25,000 more than what he was earning in Wisconsin. So it's not a difficult choice for them. So there is money in the budget now, again, whether it survives joint finance, whether it survives the legislature, but I know Carl and Travis Sartorius, who is the supervising state public defender, are hopeful that that will help with A, attraction, and B, retention. And then finally, we are partnering with, it's called the Children's Court Improvement Program. It is a program run by the Director of State Courts in Madison. I'm on the statewide committee, and they pilot what are called judicial engagement teams, where they send in staff and we then assemble a team from Department of Human Services, the courts, guardian ad litem, district attorney, public defender, to look at our child protection policies, to look at our child protection procedures, and we welcome them in December for our kickoff meeting, and so they will be partnering with us to look at how we do things in St. Croix to see if we can improve the delivery of services for kids, primarily in the child protection arena. Judge Nordstrand is here. I mentioned, Judge, that the pause on treatment court has been lifted, and we're working with Programs for Change, which has been a very positive experience, so I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add.
No, I would just emphasize that that's worked out quite well. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, we were in a staff meeting. We were addressing an individual who is receiving treatment presently from sort of legacy services from HHS. That person expressed the belief that they needed more help in terms of treatment services. And so we had a representative from Programs for Change there on Zoom or the equivalent, and I turned to the person and said, can we get him in for an assessment, see if we can provide some additional services? He said, how about tomorrow at 1:30? Unbelievable. So that was a great ability to partner with folks providing services in our community that have the ability, and they actually have the ability to deliver services in both Hudson and New Richmond, which is helpful too. So that was very positive, and I think that's going to continue going forward. And I know there's some financial issues that are still rumbling around about that. We've got some funding, the county does, when I say we, the royal we, that's provided by the Department of Corrections to fund treatment services. And I know that Phil's been working with Corporation Counsel to see to it that we can redirect some of that money It's basically for folks in treatment court and otherwise, other folks that are justice involved that need to get treatment by order of the court, that if they don't have insurance or can't get insurance, or there's hiccups about getting funding, say it might be they don't have the insurance yet, but they need to get the assessment, and it costs $400. But DOC has some funds available to fill the gap. And actually, I think St. Croix County is unique, at least fairly unique in terms of having access to those funds. So we're going to continue that process. One last thing I'll say about, I had a nice meeting last week with both supervisors from our Department of Corrections, folks here who supervise all those who are in St. Croix County. I was amazed to learn there are 1,200 people under supervision living in St. Croix County. Does anybody know what the population of St. Croix County is? Okay, so about something over 1% of the entire population in St. Croix County, including all women, children, and men, are under supervision by the Department of Corrections in their community supervision program. That gives you a sense of the scope of what is happening in our justice system and the commitment of the judges here to not using incarceration as the first tool in our toolbox. But it is pretty amazing when you consider that. And, you know, and part of that is, I would bet half of them are probably folks who are required to get an AODA assessment and follow through with treatment for substance use. And so that's the level of need, that's actually mandated by the courts, and that we need to be able as a community to figure out how to deliver. So it's a challenge.
Thank you, judges. Are there questions for the judges? I'm hearing none. I do have a couple of things to just bring to everybody's attention. First, thank you to Judge Needham and Judge Nordstrom for meeting with Supervisor Ramberg and myself in late January. We had a very, very good, extensive meeting with the judges to talk about some of the issues we talk about in our meetings, but getting into some depth in them. And we particularly talked about the public defender issue. And very tentatively, Supervisor Ramberg and I were going to put together a resolution to that regard. But as mentioned by Judge Needham, in both the governor's proposal and from what I understand the legislative branch is probably likely to do, there will be some substantial efforts with regard to our DAs and public defender. So Supervisor Ramberg and I we're deferred putting our resolution in front of us now because we believe that will solve the problem, and our resolution may or may not be necessary, but it may come back later. And that followed up on something I think that Judge Needham had originally raised, dealing with the trying to seek a reimbursement for the county for a substantial portion of the costs when the judges have to name an attorney for a defendant. And so we're going to defer on that. We haven't forgotten about it, but we'll see how the legislative item progresses. The other thing I would just bring to our attention as a group, and this could come up under future business or now, but since we've talked about it in some part, I'll bring it up now. And I'd invite the medical examiner and Phil to jump in if they'd like. But Judge Nordstrom is going to be the initial speaker at a program that we as a committee, together with the Health and Human Services Board, are co-sponsoring in May 17th, on issues related to alcoholism. I believe the medical examiner had brought this up in early January, and that led to a series of meetings with Bob Rohret and the HHS board, and Greg Telejohn, Supervisor Telejohn, and others, including Phil and staff from HHS. And so, as we've said before, drugs are a huge issue, of course, but alcohol is so much worse in this county, is a problem overall for the health of our citizens. So this program will be part of our long-term series on mental health, but it'll focus on alcoholism. And the medical examiner will be part of the program. And as I said, Judge Nordstrom will be the opening speaker on it and relating some of the observations he has from the bench and his role as the treatment court judge. Are there any questions about that? Supervisor Ramberg?
Yeah, since you brought it up, the judge issue is an example of what I look for when we have the exercise of departments looking for mandated services. I try to eye areas that us as a board can capitalize on and look for us to act on to make things better for the county and the taxpayers in regard to savings, and update outdated laws or rules in the state, and we could use us as a springboard. And this is one example of that. So I'm hoping that this would be mission accomplished if the governor puts it in there and these kinds of things happen. So I'm tickled over that, and I think that, to me, that would be mission accomplished if this continues to move forward. So that's what I keep my eye on as we have our department reports. So they're not coming forward as just an exercise in futility. I feel that there's value to them. When I was a department head, I kind of felt that it was just an exercise in futility. But now, sitting in this chair, I have a different view, and the things that I've been learning, it's pretty eye-opening, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Any other comments for the judges or anything else? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the medical examiner's report. Patty Schachtner.
Good morning. I just have a few things. I'm almost done cataloging our historical data, and I was showing the sheriff this morning. I came across the death investigation of the officer shooting back in 1955. So we actually, this is probably the only piece of history that we have an original document of. So it's I couldn't wait to text him. Look what I found. Because we had worked on the Murphy thing for years. So that was exciting. So far, what I've gotten over 50 homicides from 1929 to I'm up to 1958. So it was a different time. It's pretty interesting what we're finding. The amount of county highway workers that were killed on the job doing their work. Unbelievable how often that actually happened. Addiction and alcohol was a huge issue back then, and it was clearly defined in a lot of the death investigations that were out there. Women were not identified by their name. They were identified by Mrs. John Doe. So most of these women in here, not only do you not know who they are, you don't know their names, but they were not even considered any, a human being. So that it is interesting seeing that from from just looking at the perspective of what's documented. After we get this project done, we have one more project that I've been putting off for years that has been put off since the 80s, and I have a full drawer of death photographs, historical photographs from St. Croix County with no records. I just have the pictures. It was passed on, it's been passed on to every medical examiner, and now we're going to go through it. We have to kind of prepare ourselves for it because the pictures are very gruesome. And that, so we're going to try to figure out what's going on there, and then we will have all of the historical data as best as we can taken care of for St. Croix County. So once I get this project done, then we'll work on that, and then we should have everything that we are by statute required to have. We will have it, and we will have it organized. So, as a data nerd, that's kind of exciting for me, but this next step will be kind of hard. In 2023 so far, we have had 9 addiction-related deaths. So I have 3 pending that it's just determining what they are. Alcohol continues to be the most important thing. We're now seeing more and more chronic alcoholics being registered for hospice for end-of-life thing. So when we talk about alcoholism, the chronic part of it, we're actually seeing a lot of that going on. For the first time, and I'm not sure how to handle this, I've really been talking to a lot of peers, but the generational change to stop addiction is starting to happen, and I have now adult children of multi-generational addicted families calling and saying, where can I go for support to talk to other people who have lived with parents and grandparents who are addicted? We need to stop this. So when we talk about being proactive, I think that is something that we actually as a county and a collaborative could do that I think would have really good results. The historical piece, if there's children that are like, I don't want to live with grandma and grandpa anymore that are addicted, I don't want to live with my parents anymore that are addicted, I need to know how to survive and get the skills to not be addicted. I think there is an opportunity for St. Croix County to be a leader in this, but then I'm a death investigator. That there's out of my wheelhouse. I don't know what that would look like, but I think collaboratively there's something there. I've got a family now that, the adult children also have minor children that now they're responsible for, and they don't have the skills, but they want help. So I reached out and I got some resources, but most of them are in Minnesota, and I think we need to think about this type of support group for here in St. Croix County. But again, I don't know what that looks like. But I think it would be something that we could focus on that would have positive outcomes. Wisconsin's Counties Association reached out to me to be part of a Zoom last week talking about processes that are going on in the medical examiner's office and the funeral homes. And what I found out, didn't know this, but we're ahead of the game. We do stuff way more efficient in the western part of the state than they do in the southern and the eastern part of the state. I do cremation 7 days a week. We are constantly working with our funeral homes to make sure that we are processing. In a lot of these larger counties, they only do cremations on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That would really negatively impede what's going on in our county. So I was surprised that other counties don't do that. We also use the state form. A lot of other counties use their own form. So, we have 72 different counties, 72 different systems, and we have a statewide system for our death certificates that has a automatic generated cremation authorization right there. I do hit click, and still counties are doing their own form. It does not make any sense, but we have been using state forms as long as I've been doing this, for over 20 years. And so it just goes to show that we are utilizing what's out there much more efficiently and effectively, helping our transition with the funeral homes go through much quicker. And then finally, on March 20th, if you want to mark your calendars, at 3:30, Senator Staffschild will be doing a tour of the DD building. Seeing what we have going on out here. Of course, topology is really the hot topic. St. Croix County was the topic in the Miami Coroners Conference. Hennepin County was down there, yipping it up about how St. Croix County has got this technology and the only one around, and how they are moving forward. And the Department of Justice just now have put out a study saying topology is really where it's at. So we are ahead of the game on this here. With that, then, is going to come demand. We have been working with Polk County. But St. Croix County is our priority. We want to work with other counties, but of course, having a good business model is important, and the first thing that came was having a contract. We don't have a contract with Ramsey County. We don't have a contract with our lab, but counties want to contract with us, and when they sent us the contract, it was 26 pages long. So, of course, I sent that to Corp Counsel in Canada. I'm like, I can't sign this, you know. So they're working on having a streamlined process because this is our technology. We will guide how this conversation goes. And they're not going to tell us how we're doing our job is the first thing. And then second, we did have a request to do a pickup for a livery service because that is a high demand thing right now. And the going rate at that is far more than what we pay because we have our own vehicles. So there is an opportunity for us to start generating revenue that way. However, with that comes, you know, looking at how our department is set up. And when we come to the committee of the whole, I will show you what our plan is, and then hopefully you don't cut our budget. So that if we want to do this in an effective way, in a cost-saving way, looking in the future, we can take the money that we're saving on the not doing as many autopsies and then transition that and help build our department to be able to build capacity. So that's all I have right now.
Questions for the medical examiner? Seeing none, I've got a couple of observations. Where do I start? First, I want to backtrack slightly. And again, I'm going to do this only because the judges may have to leave and may miss the future agenda items. So I'm going to go back to the alcohol program that Patty's going to be on and Judge Nordstrom will be on. I've spoken with Chairman Talajon of the HHS board and Supervisor Osnes of the ADRC and suggested to them that maybe our May meeting could be the alcohol program. It will be in New Richmond. It'll be at 5:30 in the afternoon at the tech school. And so I said I would raise it with our committee to see if May 17th, that's a Wednesday, I believe, Patty? I think it's a Wednesday. If that would be an acceptable time for folks here, and then we would not hold our regularly scheduled May meeting, but if we have other critical items of business, we could do that. But if we didn't have critical items of business that came to our attention, we would have our meeting with, it'd be a joint meeting with HHS and the ADRC. And I've spoken to Ken Witt about how we would do that by way of proper noticing and that sort of thing. And bottom line is we can do it. Okay, so there won't be any issues there, but unless somebody has scheduling problems, I'll continue to pursue that in lieu of our regularly scheduled May meeting. And then one other item, just since the medical examiner raised it, talking about St. Croix County and how in many ways we're out front of many of our colleagues in other parts of the state. The last couple of days I was actually down in Madison and I was attending a WCA legislative meeting, but I also slipped over a couple blocks away and attended a meeting of the La Follette Public Policy School of the University of Wisconsin, and one of their programs was on public safety. And one of the featured speakers on that was a judge from Brown County. I can't remember his name, just to be honest, but he was the treatment court judge in Brown County. And as I sat around the table I was at, we had about 6 or 8 people at the table. It became clear to me that the folks at the table, most of whom were graduate students at the La Follette School, but there were a number of others as well, had no clue about county government. There were a number of aides to various representatives and state senators in attendance, whatever, but they knew nothing about county government. So as we spoke, I told them a little bit about county government and how it was set up and how we did things. And the idea came to mind that I would like to approach the La Follette School and just suggest, frankly, that they do a program on county government, but that they feature one county, i.e. St. Croix County. And this is quite a team of people. I mean, we talk. We're unique in some ways. We talk to each other. We're very civil. We're very progressive in many ways as to how we're doing our business. We're not a small county, we're not a big county, we're just a very representative county. So, again, if there's any comments people would like to make about that, I think I'm going to make that overture to their director that they might want to have an actual program, and frankly, the folks that are sitting here, plus probably Ken Witt, maybe somebody from HHS, I don't mean to exclude anybody, but a representative group of people, I think, from this county could put on a terrific program on what county government's all about. You know, probably bring in Mark O'Connell from WCA. He could give an overview of things as well. But I thought, boy, we could really educate a whole bunch of influential young people if we did something like that. So I just throw that out. If anybody has objections or comments, let me know. Otherwise, this will be way out in the future, probably fall or next year sometime, but I think I will raise it. If there's no other questions for the medical examiner, thank you. And our next item of business is the sheriff. Sheriff Knudsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple updates. The mezzanine, we are working through that process. It may be potentially late summer, early fall before we finally get the progress or the project actually in or started. Some of the things that we're kind of looking at and as we work through these processes is obviously the availability of the steel, workers, backgrounds, and even all the functionality of even the lips on there and what's welded and what is constructed prior to going in, or is all the construction in there? Is it painted prior to going in? Some of the things we have to take into account when we look at the jail population because of the way the HVAC and how the air moves through that building, through all the dorms. You know, you can only weld in one block without it impacting others. So there's lots of things that we are discussing and working on. So it's not for lack of anybody dragging their feet, but that's kind of the update that we're still working through that. We just had a meeting a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with the project managers. So there's the update on the mezzanine. Mass casualty event. On January 25th, they held a mass casualty exercise, tabletop exercise. I believe Supervisor Adams was in attendance as well. Number of individuals, and it took place, Emmy Schachner was also there, I believe, handled by our emergency management group, and it surrounded a hypothetical county fair incident with a mechanical failure of a Ferris wheel. Started out with a presentation from the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator from Waukesha County, HHS, and it was on lessons learned from the Waukesha Parade, the mass casualties there, and how they set up the Family Assistance Center to assist with that. Some policies were gone through, emergency procedures, and I hope it was beneficial for those in attendance. Patty as well, she's used to some of those tabletop exercises as well as real life trauma.
Those exercises are really good to go through. I had to leave early, but one of the questions that Janet had is what our capacity is. Our coolers will be coming in this week, so we will have capacity for 24 decedents probably by the end of the month. So again, that puts us ahead of the game when it comes to preparedness to any county around. So I think we're sitting really good.
So I believe that was a beneficial. I anticipate that there will be one of those similar either next spring or maybe this fall. There are X amount that emergency management has to do in a year, and those are supported by grants and some other funding. Right, Janet?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Our jail numbers, we're at.
Sheriff, could I interrupt for just
Yes.
1 second? Just since you were talking about the tabletop exercise, I want to thank Supervisor Adams for joining you for that exercise. And he's also taking the lead on our committee for another exercise that we might do sometime in the future. He's working with Ms. Cardinal on that. But I would turn to Supervisor Adams if he would like to make any comment about that exercise or any thoughts you've got as to what might be, the timing of things for the future might be.
Thank you, Chair. It was a great exercise, just being able to see the many participants from all over the state who were there on the big screen and hearing the different back and forth on how these kinds of incidences can be managed. The amount of resources that it would take to manage something like this, you know, you can just look at what's happening right now in East Palestine, Ohio, to get a sense. And we have a rail line that runs right through, you know, our back door over here over the river. So we definitely need to get our hands wrapped around how the county board would interface with all the various agencies from the declaration of a major incident and how we interface with state, other local, possibly even cross-state agencies. So I'm working with the chair and Natasha to put something together here in the relative near future that we can look at. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Sheriff, we'll go back to you. I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's fine. And thank you, Supervisor Adams. The jail population today is 106. There are 11 out on EHM, so we're actually at 117 in custodies, so to speak. But we are 106 in the jail today. Our average daily population for January was 98. So that's remaining fairly consistent in those numbers. The medicated assisted treatment is a program that through a grant we have started in the jail. And Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me, I'm going to actually have Kathy come up. She's the manages that grant and the tracking of that grant, and she can give an update on number of inmates that are in that process, where that process is at for some of them, and I'll turn it over to her. Thank you.
Our program coordinator has weekly informational meetings on the MAP program, and there's been anywhere from 6, max of 12 that attend that each week. So we've had about 40 people go to the informational. 17 have signed up, interested in the program, and then we do some screening and assessments, whether it's appropriate. One thing that knocks people out is if they're prison bound, and some of the charges in there, we have them in a hold pattern, or they're really not moving forward in the program. 2 have started medications, and so there's 5 that have been disqualified. 2 have started, and there's another 10 that are in the process. Some of them are in a hold pattern because of their likelihood to go to prison. Other ones are moving forward, and we're getting the screening and assessments taken care of, and hopefully starting more people in the next week or 2. So I would anticipate we'll be at 10 within the month. And we have another grant cycle coming up, and we have to grow the program in some way. That may mean more medications, different kind of programs. One of the things that the new grant is going to include is housing. 30% of the grant can go for housing. So I've had some preliminary talks with Julie Smith from the Onyx House, where maybe the grant, if they sign up on the MAP program once they're out of the jail, they could transition to sober living, and the grant could pay for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever we decide is appropriate. And I think that would set folks up for some success if we could get some sobriety and some housing is the biggest factor in maintaining sobriety, because if you're couch surfing, you're going to be right back using again. So pretty excited about it. There's a lot of interest, a lot of chatter within the blocks with the inmates. Even the ones that haven't signed up, they're thinking about it, and I'm sure they'll be back to us. And I think the information is good, and the program will only grow.
Questions for Kathy? Kathy, since the sheriff is up and you're speaking, I know you had been very active in gathering statistics together with a number of members of the sheriff's staff. Would you like to just comment on that? And maybe I'm getting ahead of Phil here, but if you could comment, Phil, if you need to jump in, feel free to jump in.
It's something that Phil and I worked with the sheriff's office, the sheriff, Lieutenant Chuck Coleman. He's a really data-driven person within the sheriff's office, and he gathered a lot of statistics sort of supporting why the referendum should be passed, and some of the challenges that the sheriff's office has had. And I think that was given to Adam for the informational data that's on the county website. So I think Chuck did a fabulous job, and it was a good collaboration.
Well, thank you to him, and thank you, Kathy. Back to the sheriff.
And playing off of that, last night I was at Somerset Township, myself and Adam were there to give our presentation on sharing information on the referendum. We met with River Channels for an on-camera interview 2 days ago, and then met with River Towns that same day for the newspaper. And as well as, I think 2 weeks ago, Administrator Witt, DA Anderson, Adam and myself were at the Towns meeting in Baldwin at the Highway Department. So we're sharing that information. One of the things that I've been sharing is, was also on my list, but I'm going to move it up a little bit, was fentanyl. We had a seizure on a traffic pursuit some weeks ago, and ended up gathering 208 grams of fentanyl. So we are at about 210 grams that we've seized this month, or this year so far. And last year, in '22, we had 144 grams seized. So milligrams, there's 1,000 milligrams in a gram. It takes 2 milligrams per the DEA to be a lethal dose. So we go to 1,000 into 1 milligram, or 1 gram, and then 210 grams seized so far. As we cut through the math, that's about enough to kill 105,000 people. And that's
Everybody in St. Croix County.
yes, yes. And we're still early in the year, so that is right on the forefront, and that's one of the things that I'm sharing with each one of the I thought that was a sobering statistic that I am sharing, not solely for referendum information, but as a general public information sharing, that it's out there, and it is becoming more prevalent. And onto the referendum components, we had testing this last Saturday. We have one open position for patrol, so we have an eligibility list gathering. We had 22 that had applied, 14 showed up to test. So now we'll see how many passed the test. Of those 22, there was only 3 that were certified law enforcement, one that was working somewhere else, and others that were just getting through. So we are feeling that pinch of availability, and those that are good candidates are sought-after candidates, not just from us, but they're looking everywhere. So those are some of the crunches that we're having right now. And any questions on any of that I've gone through? I think that was it for,
I had one question. So what kind of questions are you getting when you're going around talking about the referendum? Or what kind of concerns do people have, if any, or are they generally supportive, or what kind of reception are you getting?
they're supportive. It really comes down to the dollars. And they really want that breakdown of what is it going to cost me? What is it going to cost my household? One of the things, as it got broke down, was about $25 per 100,000 house valuation. Average median house price in St. Croix is $264,000. So it's about $65 per year. Depends on what area you're talking to. We were in Somerset last night, and they said, well, our median up here is about $500,000. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that was dollar signs that they were looking at as well. And we had just followed up the Somerset High School presentation on their referendum on April 4th as well for the school. So we'll be coming up against a few other referendums in the county as well, depending upon the municipality or jurisdiction. But by and large, people see it. You know, one of the things I start with is when Brent, Kathy, and I started in 1996, population was just under 55,000. Now we're at 95,000. It's 40,000 in 27 years. So we're trying to keep pace, trying to catch up to keep pace. So.
Supervisor Adams.
Chair, and just by way of information, I was asked by the department to sit on the interview board for that, so I'm looking to do that, so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Was that it, Sheriff?
That is
That's
it.
a big report.
Thank you very much.
You've got your hands full. Thank you for all the work you're doing on the referendum, too, because that's going to be so important coming up April 4th.
April 4th, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda, I'll turn to Phil Golly, the Head of Justice Support Services.
Thank you. So just a quick quick update on CJCC. Our bi-monthly meeting has been pushed out a week, so we will be meeting 2 weeks from today on Thursday, March 16th at 8 a.m. in this room. Usually we meet the second Monday of every other month, but we pushed it back a week for scheduling. So that is, again, our Community Justice Collaborating Council, which meets stakeholders from across the county. So that will be a kind of a unique meeting in that the presenter we'll have that day is actually joining us from the state of Illinois. She is a formerly justice-involved individual. She was on pretrial supervision, and she works with an agency that we're doing some work with, who will also be here for a site visit that day. We're going to do a little question and answer, moderated discussion with her about her experiences on pretrial supervision that I'll be leading. So if you are available on that day, I'm going to plug this because we'd like to get some good attendance. We have other agenda items that we'll be doing, but that will be our main presentation on that day. And then, like I said, we're having a site visit from the group from Advancing Pretrial Policy and Research. They'll be coming from Illinois and Indiana, our two, I call them consultants. They're not really consultants. They're just folks that we're working with. They will be here on Wednesday the 15th and Thursday the 16th, observing our pretrial practices. So we're excited for that.
Could I jump in there for a second, Bill? This is actually for the committee. Normally, I attend the CJCC meetings as the representative of this committee because there are certain named representatives, and one of them is the HHS board chair, and one of them is from the PPJ. As it happens, I will miss the March 16th meeting. I've notified Phil and Judge Needham of that because I'm doing other county duties representing us at one of the technical colleges as they have their appointments committee, and I'm sit on that committee as well, so I'm going to have to miss that one, Judge Needham. But I would encourage everybody to attend from our committee if you haven't been to a CJCC meeting. So that's 8 o'clock on March 16th.
Correct.
And Supervisor Leaf is our vice chair and would probably, oh, she's out of town. Well, so then, you guys can work out, one of the two of you, if there's a vote of some kind, will cast our official vote, and you can struggle between the two of you as to who that might be. So I just wanted to note that it's a good meeting to attend, and, but I'm afraid I'll have to miss that one. Thank you.
That's all I had. Yeah, just very brief.
Any questions for Mr. Golly?
Not a question, but we're also partnering with the University of Wisconsin on a project, and my chief judge, Judge Boyle from Barron County, sent me a note last week saying, oh, I just saw a write-up on this partnership you're doing with UW in one of their publications. So I reached out to Phil and I said, hey, we've made a UW publication, so I think he's going to, if not, send that out. And it really, I think, emphasized that partnership and what we're hoping to gain. But as I said, we didn't see it, but my chief judge saw it and let me know about it.
Yeah, so those projects, again, are ongoing for the next couple years. It's a partnership with University Year, so it's a consortium within UW-Madison, mostly grad students that we'll be working with. So again, looking for residential treatment placement for our treatment court folks, and then sober living facilities. So I think these two projects that we've identified are happening elsewhere in the county, which is great because we can partner with the MAT grant program and with Julie Smith from Onyx House. So a lot of opportunities for these projects.
Any other questions for Phil? Medical examiner, Patty Schachter.
I forgot to add one thing to my report. We started a new program with the Congregational Church in Roberts. The quilters there every Tuesday are making quilts for our decedents' families. So now when we go to a scene or have a home death or a visit, we shroud our decedents with a handmade quilt and then give that quilt to the families. It seems to really help with the grieving process. And the quilters are very excited to do this as a form of service to people in St. Croix County. So it doesn't cost anything, but it again is one thing that shows how in St. Croix County we have compassion and empathy for everybody.
Thank you for that very much. I would just add that Krista Severson usually joins us, and she had other important business this morning and asked if she could be excused, and of course she was. And of course we always have Lisa with us, Lisa Plunkett, our child support administrator. Lisa didn't want anything on the agenda today, from what I understand, but I would always want to recognize Lisa and look forward to her reports when you have them. Thank you. That concludes the business part of the agenda. Do we anything for our future agenda items that we'd like to bring up? I think I kind of talked about most of that earlier when I talked about the May 17th alcohol program, and we'll pursue that. Seeing none, we'll move on to Janet, any correspondence you'd like to report on? With that?
I have an
I'm sorry, Joe.
announcement, Chair. I apologize for interrupting, but we had an unexpected event after your last county board meeting where there was a planned power outage and then the generator failed. And so we were without power in the building for an hour, Taylor, close to it? Hour and 15 minutes. And you don't realize how dependent you are on electricity until you don't have it. The court's now being totally electronic. But what I wanted to recognize was that it also disabled all of our security. And to the sheriff's credit, they had investigators and deputies up on the second floor within minutes to secure, our hallway and to secure and pretty much empty out the second floor because, of course, we're not operating. We didn't really need any citizens up there, other people. So just a thank you to the sheriff for an amazing response to an unexpected event and making sure, again, we had security for the judges and our staff. But again, it just continues to amaze me at the response that we get when we have those types of events. So thank you to the sheriff.
I'll just add our thanks to the Sheriff's Department, and thank you, Judge, for that update as well. the next meeting is scheduled for April 6th. That'll be a couple of days after the referendum. So at that point, we'll frankly know if we were successful or not. If we weren't successful, it could be quite an interesting meeting as we discuss what the alternatives are if we don't get the referendum adopted. So our April 6th will be our next scheduled meeting. And with that, if there's no other comments, we're adjourned at 8:55. Thank you very much for everybody participating today.